All right, we'll say good morning. Let us begin today. We have an incredible source in Mesillas Yesharim to begin. Perek Chav Aleph, chapter 21 in Mesillas Yesharim. We are still continuing in the topic of Chasidus. This particular chapter is titled B'darchei Knios HaChasidus, in the manner in which we acquire the need of Chasidus. So by now, we are well acquainted with the style of the Ramchal, where the Ramchal introduces us to a particular midah, to a particular attribute, quality, then tells us, qualifies the quality a little bit, and then ultimately again explains how to acquire that particular quality. So now again, after we've described what is Chasidus, after we've described what's Chasidus, we focused on what he called the Mishkal HaChasidus, qualifying ultimately again what is actual Chasidus, and now again how do we acquire the midah. So writes Ramchal, Hine, Mima Shiyoel Harbe Liknos HaChasidus, Hu Godol Histaklos V'ro Bizbonenos. The way, or the thing, that allows us to acquire Chasidus in a most acute fashion is what he calls Godol Histaklos V'ro Bizbonenos. Literally, looking and introspection. Look, Histaklos is looking, introspection, such as the same thing. So really what allows me to become a chassid is becoming an introspective individual. How so? When a person begins to contemplate the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the complete nature, the completeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the completion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then on the other hand, the person contemplates Varol ha'herchek ha'bilti meshuar shebein gidulasa ubein shiflusenu, and then I contemplate the contrast between myself and the Ribono Shel Olam. So step one says Ramchal is contemplation of the greatness of God, the awesomeness of God. What's my entire purpose in life? My entire essence, my entire tachlis, my entire job is to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then I contemplate God's greatness. I contemplate where I am currently holding, and I recognize what? The enormous gulf between where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, where I currently am, and now this incredible gulf that I have to traverse. This incredible space, this incredible gap that I have to bridge. He goes on, V'yikrom lo, shemale yira ura adam milafanav. And I will say, what does that create? That creates a sense of awe and trepidation. Now I realize again how much I have to do, how much I have to accomplish, how much distance I have to make up, and it fills me with an incredible sense of awe. So I'll say that's step one. Step two, I then begin to I begin to contemplate all of the great things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does with us, and the great love that Hashem has for Klal Yisrael, and ultimately how close the Yesharim are to Him, those who are straight are to Him, the greatness of Torah and Mitzvos, so again, so step one is contemplation of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Step two is the contemplation or hisbonenos of where I currently am and how much distance I have to bridge in order to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Step three is then contemplation of the great things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all the chasadim, all the chesed, the kindness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for me. Included in that is the incredible love that He showers upon me, upon Klal Yisrael. Step five, ultimately again is the greatness of Torah and mitzvos. And when I contemplate all of these things, says Ramchal, what's the net result? Vadai, shetislahit bo ahava aza. The result of all of this is bonenos. The result of all of this contemplation is that a person will be ignited with an incredibly intense fire of love. The yivchar, the yisavel adabikbo, and I'm going to want to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kibir also shabori yisbaruch hu lanu la'av mamish umirachim alinu ke'av abanim. Because I will say, after all this contemplation, what a person will realize is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mamish like a father to us, and He literally loves us like a father, has compassion upon us like a father. Yisorer bo behemshech. It ignites within me a reciprocal desire for connection. Just like a father is fundamentally connected to his children, and a father wants to do good for his children, a father wants to take care of his child. So what happens? When the child becomes old enough and mature enough to recognize everything the father does for him, what happens? It ignites within the child a desire to connect with the father. He says, "Hachifetz v'atashuka ligmalo keben el aviv." It ignites within me the desire to bestow good upon my father. Because again, when a son becomes fully cognizant of all that his father does for him, it ignites within him a reciprocal desire to bestow good upon the father. So Rabbi said, this is really an incredible piece. What Ramchal is highlighting over here, at least in this first part, is the pathway to Chasidus is not necessarily paved in an actional fashion, but rather it's paved through contemplation, through hisbonenos, through the contemplation of the greatness of God, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, where I am, this enormous gulf that I have to traverse in order to come close. But yet, despite that gulf, everything that Hashem does for me, all the good that He bestows upon me, all of the chesed, the fact that He gives me Torah and mitzvos as vehicles of self-actualization, of growth, of closeness. What's the net result of that? Is I'm overwhelmed by the love that my Father has for me. And now that I see the love that my Father has for me and the good that He showers upon me, it ignites within me a desire for reciprocity. He does so much for me, bestows so much upon me. I want to give something back. I want to do something for Him. The same way, again, that the Father bestows upon the Son has a desire to bestow upon the Father. So we'll say, so again, but we're describing this contemplation as if it's something easy and just occurs on its own. The Ramchal says, in order for this contemplation to occur, so obviously we'll say, what does contemplation require? So there's a couple of things contemplation requires. Number one, time. Number two, being alone with yourself, right? They will say, you can't contemplate and check your email. At this, right? It doesn't work. You can't contemplate and tweet, right? It doesn't, in other words, this is probably one of the hardest things for us, right? Hisbonenos requires hisbodidus. Contemplation, hisbonenos, requires hisbodidus. Hisbodidus means being alone with oneself. As we write over here, sheis bodid bechadarav. You have to be alone with yourself in your room. It doesn't have to be in your room. It could be wherever you want. But lamaisa, just to be alone with yourself. V'yikbos kol madao usvunas. Listen to these words. You have to collect your understanding and your insight. El histaklus v'ela inyon v'ela iyun b'dvar mamiti ma'ila. What does this mean? You have to collect your wisdom and your insight to look in depth at these things that we're discussing. We'll say, what is he referring to over here? Focus. You need two things. Hisbodidus, a little bit to carve out some time to be alone with yourself, and focus. Focus on this, on what we just read. To focus on these words, to focus on these concepts. The greatness of Hashem, where Hashem is, where I am, the gulf I have to traverse, the chasadim that Hashem does for me, both in the form of chesed as well as the form of Torah and mitzvos that He gives. The idea that He's my Father does so much good. I'm a son. I want to reciprocate. These concepts are not complicated, says Ramchal, but you need to carve out time to think about them and focus on them in order for them to truly make a difference in your life. V'hinei, v'adai, shi'azreu lazeh, rov hasmada va'ir mizmori David. So we'll say this is so beautiful. What could help with this process of his bodidus and his bonenos? Being alone with oneself and being a bit contemplative. What could help with it? Tehillim. The recitation of Tehillim. He says, what would help with this is spending a good amount of time. Now, hasmada and iyun literally means in-depth learning. So Ramchal is not saying that you have to learn up Tehillim. Once again, hasmada and iyun means to become, to habituate oneself, something consistent, and iyun means to devote yourself to it. B'mizmorei davra alav shalom. Tilim visbonin bam, contemplation about them, b'mareim ve'inyanim, about the words and about their topics. I will say the truth is, the great power of Tehillim, I'll say, I think most people, when they say Tehillim, how much of Tehillim do you understand when you actually read it? Almost nothing. Almost nothing. Okay, almost nothing is a bit of exaggeration. But the idea is, because Tehillim is poetry, right? It's David HaMelech's poetry. So often, again, it's written in a way that just reading it without a translation, without Rashi, without something is very difficult. The beauty of Tehillim is even without understanding one word of it, it has a cathartic effect on who and what you are. There's something about David HaMelech's words that by definition soothes the soul and just puts me in a different state of mind. So Ramchal says, saying Tehillim is a very powerful tool for his boninus. Again, his bodidus requires you to carve out some time, requires me to carve out some time of being alone with myself. But once I carve that out, Tehillim can be a very powerful tool for his boninus. He goes on, he says, Ki biyosem kula meleim ava v'yira v'chamini chasidus, because Tehillim itself is filled with David HaMelech's love, his awe and trepidation. It's filled with chasidus. Hine bizbonin obam. When you contemplate Tehillim, lo yimna meis over bo his oris gadol, lotzeis be'ikvosav la'alechas bidrachav. This is so beautiful. The Ramchal says almost like the net effect, just the net effect of reading Tehillim. Tehillim itself is filled with so much love of Hashem, so much awe and reverence of Hashem. And ultimately, again, Tehillim itself is filled with David HaMelech's aspirational desires to become a chassid. So the words of Tehillim itself reflect so many of the dynamics that we are learning about. So we'll say, so that's step number one. Step one is for the acquisition to acquire the midah of chasidus. So step number one is step number one is his bodidus. During his bodidus, his boninus, Tehillim, the Torah lakriya b'sipra maseh chasidim. We'll say it's so beautiful. What's another tool? Reading stories of Chasidim. Now, I will say this doesn't have to mean like the way we think about Sipurei Chasidim, right? It could be, but it's also reading stories about people who were Chasidim, who personified this midah that we are learning. Ba'agados asher ba'u sham ki kol ilam ma'orim es hasechal le'isya'itz v'la'asos ki ma'aseim hanechmadim v'zeh mevuar. I will say there's something to reading stories of great people. When you read stories of great people, they awaken within you. See, when you learn something, so sometimes learning remains in the abstract. When you go ahead and you learn stories of people, and the stories show you how people lived, so many of these ideas and the ideals that we are discussing, it takes concepts from the abstract and ultimately plugs them into reality. So it says Ramchal, reading Sipurei Chasidim, reading stories of great people, could absolutely be tremendously beneficial in helping us to acquire this midah. So we'll stop over here for today. So what Ramchal leaves us with is that in order to acquire the midah of Chasidus, number one, hisbodidus, carving out time to be with ourselves. Number two, during that hisbodidus, ultimately contemplating contemplation, his boninus. What am I contemplating? All of the things that Ramchal spelled out over here. Number three, recitation of Tehillim. Number four, Sipurei Chasidim. So we'll stop over for today. Wake up and Mesillas Hashem with this parak tomorrow. Shkoyach.